The date is irrelevant to the seasons, but critical to the record. It is the immediate aftermath of the Great War. The location is a sector where the fighting had stopped, but the bureaucracy had just begun. In the administrative archives recovered post-war, a statistical impossibility exists. A ledger records the population of a single residential block. On a Tuesday, the census is complete. Families are accounted for. Rations are calculated. However, the records for Wednesday tell a different story. 31 people who were alive and present the day before were no longer listed the next morning. There is no report of a night skirmish. There is no log of an official evacuation. There is no documented mass detention in the precinct files. The number 31 appeared once in the ink, and then vanished from the archives entirely. To understand the silence, we must understand the noise that preceded it. The year was 1945. Europe was a graveyard of infrastructure. Telegraph lines were cut. Roads were craters. The state itself was fractured. In this vacuum, the only authority was the paper trail left by occupying forces and provisional governments. But paper is fragile. In this specific town, the administrative clock had stopped. The police force had dissolved. The new command was not yet established. For a period of 48 hours, this district existed in a legal blind spot. It was in this shadow that they disappeared. Witness testimonies, collected months later, describe a morning of absolute stillness. There were no signs of struggle in the street. Doors were not kicked in. Windows were intact. Inside the residences, life appeared paused. The archives do not record any property damage claims. Meals were left half-eaten. Coats remained on hooks. Valuable items, scarce during the war, were left gathering dust. If they left with nothing. If they were taken without resistance. The scene was not a crime scene. It was simply empty. Humans eventually returned to the streets. Neighbors from adjacent blocks emerged from cellars and temporary shelters. They expected the usual sounds of post-war survival: bartering, clearing debris, crying. Instead, they found a vacuum. Interviews conducted by relief agencies mention a collective confusion. The neighbors assumed the 31 had moved to the countryside, or perhaps they had been processed by a repatriation unit. But as hours turned into days, the silence became heavy. Nobody had said goodbye. Nobody had seen a truck. The neighborhood simply woke up lighter. We turn to the civil registry. This document is the spine of our investigation. The local clerk, working with limited resources, had conducted a head count for food stamps on the 12th. The names are clear. Ages range from infants to the elderly. Occupations vary: a baker, 2 mechanics, a teacher, several laborers. On the page dated the 13th, the column is blank. There is no notation of deceased, no stamp of transferred. The clerk simply stopped writing their names. The archives do not explain why the pen stopped. It is a bureaucratic amputation. We cross-reference this with military logs. The occupying forces were obsessed with documentation. Every liter of fuel, every round of ammunition, and every prisoner of war was cataloged. If a platoon had entered the sector to detain 31 civilians, a transport log would exist. A request for 31 rations would be filed. We have combed through the regimental diaries of the units stationed within a 50-mile radius. The result is negative. There are no patrol reports for that night. The archives do not record any operation in that specific grid. According to the military, the sector was quiet. Here lies the fracture in reality. The civil archive proves they existed. The military archive implies they did not matter. This discrepancy is not paranormal. It is administrative. However, the precision of the disappearance is what chills the blood. It was not random. It was a specific group, in a specific building complex, removed in a specific time frame. The data does not overlap. It is as if two different versions of history were written, and we are reading the pages that do not match. Physical traces contradict the silence of the books. Recovery teams later found personal effects that no refugee would willingly abandon. Identification papers, ration cards. These were the currency of life in 1945. To leave them behind was to choose non-existence. Yet, they were found in drawers and on tables. The documents that are left do not explain this contradiction. Why would 31 people walk away from the only proof of their identity? We must analyze the possibilities through the lens of history, not fantasy. The first theory is an undocumented emergency evacuation. In the final days of the conflict, rogue units and fractured commands often acted without orders. It is historically possible that a transport unit, retreating or relocating, commandeered the civilians for labor or protection. Such convoys often failed to log their cargo. If they were moved by a unit that was subsequently destroyed or disbanded, the record died with the soldiers. The second probability is rapid relocation. The borders of Europe were being redrawn overnight. Populations were shifted like sand. Millions were displaced. It is plausible that an order was given verbally to clear the sector for strategic reasons. In the chaos, the paperwork was either never filled out or lost in transit. They may have been merged into a larger column of refugees, their individual identities washing away into the ocean of the displaced. The third, and perhaps most bureaucratic explanation, is administrative detention. Screening camps were established to filter combatants from civilians. These camps were overwhelmed. Intake processing often lagged behind reality by weeks. A group of 31 could easily be held in a transit zone, categorized under a group number rather than individual names. They exist in the physical world, but in the world of data, they are merely a statistic waiting to be filed. Decades later, researchers uncovered a fragment that might offer a clue. In a displaced persons camp catalog, 40 miles east of the vanished point, similar surnames appear. The spellings are incorrect. The dates are off by 2 days, but the cluster is undeniable. It suggests that a group from the same origin point arrived together. However, the record is damaged. It lists arrival, but the column for departure or destination is illegible due to water damage. This is where the trail runs cold. We cannot confirm if these were the same 31 individuals. The archives do not provide photographs. The dates do not align perfectly. We are left with a correlation, not causation. History demands proof, and proof requires a continuous chain of custody for the truth. That chain is broken. The documents that remain do not explain the gap. We are staring at a puzzle with the centerpieces burned away. For the families searching, the lack of a record is worse than a death certificate. Death is a period at the end of a sentence. Missing is a question mark that never fades. Without a body, there is no funeral. Without a record of arrest, there is no appeal. Without a destination, there is no search party. The 31 individuals became ghosts while they were likely still breathing. They were victims not of a weapon, but of a clerical void. We must contextualize this event. It is not unique. This happened in Warsaw. It happened in Berlin. It happened in Vienna. The post-war era was a black hole for data. Thousands walked out of their homes and dissolved into the fog of peace. This specific case of 31 people is simply one of the few instances where we have the before snapshot clearly defined, making the after blankness so stark. It is a microcosm of a continental amnesia. Why do the archives fail to explain? Because archives are written by men, and men were tired. In 1945, priority was given to survival, not statistics. Paper was used for fire, ink was frozen. The people recording history were often just trying to live through it. The disappearance of 31 people was a tragedy, but in the scale of millions, it was a clerical error. The system did not conspire to hide them. The system simply collapsed under the weight of the world. There is no evidence of the supernatural. There is no proof of a sophisticated conspiracy. The facts point to a mundane, yet terrifying reality. They were moved. They were processed. And somewhere along the line, a piece of paper fell off a truck, or a ledger was burned for warmth. That is the only reason we consider this a mystery. It is a tragedy of logistics. The archives do not record their fate. Not because it is unexplainable, but because no one was watching. We look back at the empty street. The names on the list. The lives that continued elsewhere or ended in silence. We cannot rewrite the ledger. We can only acknowledge the blank space. The 31 people of that Tuesday morning eventually met their end, somewhere, recorded or not. But as for this specific moment in time, the conclusion is final. They did not disappear from the world. They disappeared from history.